imagine you have like $3 million sitting in the bank.
Right.
And it's earmarked specifically for your next home. You know, you're relocating to the Midwest, you want space, you want luxury.
Yeah, you basically have the capital to get exactly what you want.
Exactly. So you would think the obvious move is to just buy a pristine plot of land, right? Like hire an architect, build your custom palace completely from scratch.
Which is what most people assume, yeah.
But right now, some of the wealthiest buyers in America are doing the exact opposite. I mean, they are actively running away from new construction.
They are avoiding it entirely. And the reasons why reveal this massive shift in how we value time, certainty, and, well, existing assets.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this deep dive today, because our mission is to unpack a very specific, undeniable trend. We're looking at Q2 of 2026.
Yeah.
And suddenly the chaotic, localized mess of the national real estate market has this one focal point. We are talking about Indianapolis.
Right. It's not Miami, it's not Austin, and it's definitely not a coastal tech hub.
No, not at all.
And to really understand why this is happening, we are pulling exclusively from a highly detailed Q2 2026 market update and analysis. It's by Kara Conde.
Right.
She's a certified luxury home marketing specialist, and she's been analyzing and operating in the Indianapolis area for over 20 years now.
Okay, let's unpack this, because right out of the gate in this report, there is a statistic that forced me to completely reevaluate the Midwest.
Oh, you mean the ranking?
Yes. In late January of this year, Zillow released its annual ranking of the 50 largest U.S. metros. And they didn't just put Indianapolis in the top 10.
Yep.
They named it the absolute #1 most buyer-friendly housing market in America for 2026.
Which is huge because, Zillow's modeling is notoriously ruthless.
Yeah.
They don't hand out that ranking based on subjective feelings or like a really good local PR campaign.
Right. It's all data.
Exactly.
All right.
Their model weighs 3 very specific hard data factors. So you've got affordability relative to local incomes, expected home value appreciation, and competition.
Which really just means how much actual inventory buyers have to choose from, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Indianapolis hit the top of the chart because it's somehow balancing all 3 simultaneously.
So before we get to the multi-million-dollar estates and, why buyers are avoiding new construction, we really have to look at the bedrock here.
The macro view.
Right. Why is Zillow's algorithm pointing directly at Indy?
Well, it comes down to a very specific equation highlighted in Conde's report. The typical Indianapolis home value is sitting right around $283,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you compare that to the coasts or even to the Mountain West, I mean, it's obviously incredibly affordable.
Right. But affordability alone usually signals like a stagnant market.
Exactly. But that isn't the case here. The projected 12-month appreciation is a very healthy, nearly 3%.
Okay, so you're buying an affordable asset that is steadily growing.
Yeah. But the real mechanism driving this, the thing that actually changes the physical reality of buying a house, is the inventory stabilization.
You mean the actual number of front doors you can unlock and walk through on a Saturday?
Exactly that. Across the broader market, homes for sale are up over 15% year over year.
Which is significant.
It is.
Yeah.
And when you look at the luxury suburbs, inventory has surged by roughly 34% compared to those crazy days of 2024 and 2025.
Which fundamentally rewires the psychology of the buyer. I was looking at these numbers, and my immediate thought was that this is a Goldilocks market.
Oh, like that?
Yeah, because it's not crashing, right? Prices are still creeping up, so sellers aren't trapped underwater like we're seeing in some of the heavily inflated pandemic boom towns.
Right.
But it's also not that toxic, frenzied environment where you have to waive your inspection and offer your firstborn just to get a counteroffer.
Yeah, totally.
It's just balanced. And because of this cooling, there is a wild data point from the report. Buyer purchasing power in Indianapolis is actually up over $29,000 compared to last year.
It's crazy. And think about what that leverage actually buys you. That $29,000 is a completely renovated kitchen. Or it's a massive chunk of a down payment that simply wasn't available to buyers 12 months ago.
And if you are listening to this right now from, say, Seattle or Boston or Atlanta, this still matters deeply to you.
Absolutely.
Because what we are looking at in Indianapolis isn't just a local quirk. It is a masterclass in how a healthy, stabilizing housing market actually behaves. It's basically the blueprint for normalization that the rest of the country is desperately trying to reach.
That's a really great way to frame it. And when you zoom in from that macro view down to the micro view, specifically the luxury market,
Yeah.
that normalization reveals some deeply counterintuitive trends.
Well, wait, let me push back on this a little bit.
Right.
Because earlier we talked about luxury buyers running away from new construction.
Right.
If I am a high-income corporate executive and I'm moving to the Midwest because my buying power just jumped, why wouldn't I just build?
It seems like the obvious choice.
Right. If I have the capital, I don't want someone else's 10-year-old architectural choices. I want my own custom layout. Why on earth would I buy a resale property?
What's fascinating here is what Condé's report refers to as the RCPI. That's the Replacement Cost Price Index.
Okay.
This metric tracks the hard costs of new construction versus the pricing of existing resale properties.
Got it.
And right now, the mechanism behind building a house is fundamentally broken for the consumer. New construction in this market carries an 8 to 15% price per square foot premium over existing homes.
Wait, really? So it literally costs 15% more to build the exact same house that is already sitting completed down the street?
Often more, actually, once you factor in the invisible costs. The RCPI doesn't just measure lumber and drywall.
Right.
It factors in specialized labor shortages, extended permitting delays, fluctuating material costs.
Oh, sure.
And then you have the landscaping, the window treatments, the driveway, all the things an existing home already comes with.
So the market is just reacting exactly how you would expect rational economic actors to react.
Exactly. The absorption rate, which measures how fast homes are selling, is sitting at a very healthy 50.7% for resale homes.
Okay.
But for new construction, it's lagging noticeably, down around 36%.
That is a massive behavioral gap.
It is. Buyers are doing the math. They're realizing that by purchasing a resale home, they get dramatically more square footage, they get mature 50-year-old trees instead of tiny saplings.
Yeah, and establish neighborhood amenities.
Exactly. They don't have to live in a dust bowl for 2 years waiting for the developer to finish the community clubhouse.
That makes total sense when you frame it around time and friction. And there's one stat you pulled from the report that I think perfectly encapsulates this.
The ultra-luxury one.
Yes. In the ultra-luxury segment, so homes over $2.5 million, there are currently only 11 active listings and absolutely zero pending sales.
Yeah.
Zero. If you have that kind of wealth, you are actively refusing to deal with supply chain delays or contractor disputes. You just want to walk into an established estate, drop your bags, and go to the country club.
Yeah, they are buying time and certainty just as much as they are buying real estate.
Right.
And that desire for certainty is actually the perfect bridge to the next massive piece of this puzzle.
The financing.
Right. Because if these buyers are refusing to build and they are hunting for these massive established estates, we really have to look at how they are financing these lifestyles.
Yeah.
The reluctance to pay an unpredictable premium for a new build ties directly into the math of the current mortgage market.
Okay, so let's look at that. Because honestly, I assume a buyer spending $3 million on a luxury estate is just paying cash, especially if they're relocating from a much more expensive coastal city.
You'd assume so, but the data actually shows otherwise. As of Q2 2026, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate is hovering right around 6.3%, and that's based on the Freddie Mac weekly average. And more importantly, major players like Fannie Mae and the Mortgage Bankers Association, they project rates to stay in a very tight, predictable corridor.
Like the 6.1 to 6.5% range. Right.
Exactly, for the rest of the year.
So what does this all mean? Because 6.3% is a long way from the pandemic-era historic lows that everyone seems to be secretly waiting to return.
Well, it isn't a historic low, no, but it represents predictability.
Oh.
And predictability is a currency all its own in high-end real estate. For a luxury buyer taking out a $1.5 to $3 million mortgage, they're using that 6.3% rate strategically.
Because they're often corporate executives, right?
Right. They have the capital to pay cash, sure, but they understand opportunity cost.
So they'd rather leave their $2 million in the stock market or, other investments that might yield 8 or 10% rather than tying it all up in drywall and brick.
Precisely. By locking in a mortgage at 6.3%, they get a monthly payment that is highly manageable relative to their executive income, and they maintain their liquidity.
Right.
But, and this is key, they can only make that calculation if the rate is stable.
I look at that 6.3% rate as like a cure for motion sickness.
Oh, that's good.
Think about the volatility we saw in 2024. Rates were jumping a full percentage point in a matter of weeks.
It was chaos.
You'd get pre-approved on a Friday, and by Tuesday, your projected monthly payment had shot up by $800. It was paralyzing.
Yeah.
But now, the rate is just sitting there. You aren't rushing to beat a rate hike, and you aren't sideline praying for a miraculous drop.
Which means buyers can finally focus on the actual property rather than playing the interest rate casino.
Right.
And the report takes us on a tour of 3 distinct luxury pockets around Indianapolis to show us exactly where this capital is flowing.
Okay, let's get into the suburbs.
Each of these 3 suburbs tells a slightly different story about the mechanics of supply and demand right now. Let's start with Carmel.
Carmel seems to be the poster child for the balanced market we were just talking about. The average home value is hovering around $563,000, which is up about 4% year over year.
Yeah.
But the most critical data point for anyone looking to buy in that area completely blew my mind. Roughly 34% of the active luxury listings in Carmel have had price reductions.
That's a huge number.
Over a third of sellers are dropping their prices. Why is that happening in a growing market?
It's happening because of the turnkey premium we discussed earlier. Sellers in Carmel who are anchored to the absolute peak frenzied pricing of 2024 are getting a really harsh reality check. If their home isn't perfectly updated, like if the kitchen feels like 2012 or the roof only has 5 years left, it just sits.
Because buyers have leverage now.
Exactly. They refuse to pay peak prices for a project. So the price drops. But the underlying foundational value of Carmel remains incredibly strong.
You have top-rated schools, the arts and design district, very easy commutes.
Right. It's a pragmatic, high-value play, but only if the price reflects the condition.
It's the safe, smart money. You get the great schools, you get the amenities, and right now, if you are willing to do a little cosmetic work, you get to negotiate aggressively.
Totally.
But then the report shifts over to Zionsville, and the underlying mechanics change completely.
Yeah, Zionsville is operating on an entirely different frequency.
How so?
Well, the average home value is significantly higher, approaching $680,000, and it's appreciating faster, up over 6% year over year.
Okay.
And the inventory here, especially for homes over the $1 million mark, is much tighter than in Carmel.
But why? If they're neighboring luxury suburbs, why are people paying a premium and fighting over tighter inventory in Zionsville? What's the structural difference?
It's geography and zoning. Zionsville offers a highly walkable historic village charm, but it's paired with large estates sitting on actual acreage. Yeah, that specific combination, historic density paired with sprawling land, is incredibly rare. You literally cannot build more historic, walkable villages with multi-acre estates attached to them.
So it's a hard cap on supply.
Exactly. And because that supply is inherently constrained, local forecasts are predicting a massive 6 to 11% appreciation potential for select submarkets there through the end of the year.
That is wild.
Yeah, if you buy into Zionsville, you are holding a scarce, irreplaceable asset.
Okay, so Carmel is the balanced, pragmatic play, and Zionsville is the supply-constrained appreciation play.
Right.
But then we get to the Geist Reservoir and Fishers area, and this is the pure lifestyle squeeze.
It's a fascinating micromarket. Overall, the median sale price in the Geist and Fishers area looks approachable, sitting around $505,000 to $515,000.
But that number is highly deceptive, isn't it?
Very. The moment you look at true waterfront estates, the entry point jumps to $800,000 and scales very quickly into the multi-millions.
And the inventory practically vanishes. There are only around 34 to 40 active listings in the core waterfront luxury segment.
Right.
And homes are moving incredibly fast, an average of just over 42 days on the market.
Because you aren't making a pragmatic calculation here. You are buying an emotional asset.
Yeah.
You're buying a private dock, resort-style boating, panoramic water views, all paired with a top-tier school district.
Yeah.
You cannot manufacture more waterfront property.
No.
The demand is intense, and it's driven entirely by lifestyle.
Which perfectly sets up the craziest revelation in this entire deep dive.
Oh, yeah, the shadow market.
Yes, because when you have intense emotional demand for a highly limited resource like a waterfront estate on Geist Reservoir, wealthy buyers don't just wait around for a first sale sign to pop up in the yard. They get creative.
They absolutely do.
And that leads us to the shadow market.
The off-market transactions. The report reveals a truly jaw-dropping statistic.
Yeah.
In the Indianapolis luxury space, particularly for the finest estates, over $2 million, over 70% of those properties transact privately.
That's just wow.
They are bought and sold before they ever appear on the multiple listing service.
70%. Let that sink in. If you are a listener right now, casually scrolling Zillow or Redfin on your couch looking for a $3 million mansion in Indianapolis, you are only seeing, at best, 30% of the actual market.
Yeah.
You are quite literally looking at the leftovers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains so much about the modern luxury economy, not just in Indiana, but nationally.
Right.
This shadow market is heavily driven by those high-income corporate relocations we touched on. You have massive global companies based in Indy, like Eli Lilly, Roche, and others, bring in top-tier executives.
And they want very specific things.
Yes. These specific buyers prioritize three things: speed, absolute privacy, and turnkey condition. They want integrated smart home features, they want dedicated wellness spaces, and they want the entire transaction handled quietly through a specialized broker network.
I mean, they don't want their neighbors knowing what they paid, and they certainly don't want strangers walking through their primary bedroom during a Sunday open house.
Exactly. And the flip side of this turnkey demand is brutal for sellers who haven't maintained their properties.
Because they just sit there.
Yeah, as the report notes, dated properties in this tier simply bleed value. If a home requires work, the high-end buyer doesn't negotiate. They simply move on to an off-market property that is already perfect.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you are listening to this and wondering how to navigate this kind of environment in your own city, the report actually lays out a brilliant blueprint for 2026.
It really does.
If you're a buyer, your first step is locking down that predictable financing. You need to be pre-approved so you can move at the speed of an all-cash buyer. Second, you need to leverage the increased inventory in places like Carmel to aggressively negotiate on things like inspections or closing costs.
Yeah, use that leverage.
But most importantly, you have to tap into a specialist network. You cannot rely on public apps if 70% of the best homes are hiding in the shadow market.
Absolutely. And if you are a seller, the playbook requires a harsh reality check. You must price your home to current Q2 2026 comparables.
Not 2024.
Right. You cannot price your home based on the aspirational peaks of 2 years ago. If you price too high, you're going to become part of that statistic in Carmel, slowly slashing your price week after week.
Yeah.
Furthermore, you have to invest heavily in professional staging, modern lighting, luxury photography. You have to manufacture that turnkey emotional appeal because that is the only thing the modern buyer is willing to pay a premium for right now.
It is a complete paradigm shift. I mean, we started out today trying to understand why Zillow named Indianapolis the #1 buyer-friendly metro in America, and I think the mechanics are incredibly clear now.
Yeah, it's defined by a sweet spot.
Exactly. You have healthy, steady appreciation. You have an anchor of stable mortgage rates sitting right around 6.3%, which allows buyers to actually plan.
Right.
And because inventory has recovered up nearly 34% in some luxury suburbs, there is a massive shift in negotiation power firmly back into the hands of the buyer, as long as they know where to look.
And the value for you as the listener goes far beyond the city limits of Indianapolis.
So true.
Whether you are actively hunting for a Midwest estate or you're just trying to make sense of the national housing rebalance in your own backyard, these dynamics are universal.
Right.
Understanding the steep premium buyers are willing to pay for a turnkey resale property to avoid the hidden costs of new build. Understanding how stable interest rates unlock frozen capital.
Yeah.
These are the mental models that make you a much sharper participant in any real estate market anywhere in the country.
It's about reading the underlying currents, not just the surface waves. Which actually brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. We talked about how 70% of the ultra-luxury market in Indianapolis is now transacting completely off-market, entirely through private whisper networks.
Yeah, that shadow market.
Right. And it makes you wonder, if the best, most valuable homes in a market are essentially trading in the dark, what does that mean for the future of public real estate platforms?
That is a really important question about transparency in the digital age.
Right. Because we all rely on these apps to tell us what our neighborhoods are worth. But if the data we see on sites like Zillow or Redfin is missing 70% of the top-tier transactions, is it actually painting a complete picture of American real estate wealth?
Yeah.
Or are we all just staring at a broken compass while the real market moves completely out of sight?
It is definitely something to think about the next time you check your home's estimated value online.
Exactly. Until next time, keep digging into the data.